Welcome to another unit guide. Today is going to be all about everyone's favorite lovable, bulbous Carbot villain, the Infestor. The Infestor is a spellcaster that has both control and supportive abilities. It has no inherent attack, so any major value instead comes from abilities cast. In order to spawn an Infestor from larva, you must first construct an infestation pit. You can have your drone morph into an infestation pit once you have lair tech unlocked in a normal game. At the infestation pit, you can also find two research options to help your infestors. The first is pathogen glands, which takes 57 seconds and increases the amount of energy that your infestors start with upon spawning. The other is neural parasite, which allows your infestors to use the neural parasite ability. Before I talk about each ability, I should note the infestor's incredibly awesome passive trait here, burrow move. The infestor has the ability to move while burrowed, and this is a completely passive and automatic ability. So you just need to research burrow from a hatchery, lair, or hive for it to work.
Research complete.
Tell the infestor to burrow, and it can still move around completely undetected, unless they have a detector, of course. On to the three abilities. Fungal growth is the first ability that I want to talk about from the Infestor. Fungal growth is an area of effect ability, meaning after you click the ability, you have an area of effect reticle here to target where you want to fire. Once you target that area, the Infestor will spit out a green glob to that area, and when it gets to the destination, it explodes, triggering the ability's effect. Fungal growth affects all enemy units, air and ground, in the area hit, applying a 75% slow and 30 points of damage over 3 seconds to everything that's hit. This ability is best used up against groups of enemies and is primarily used to slow them down and catch them. It should also be noted that while units are affected by fungal growth, they cannot cloak, blink, load into a transport, or burrow. Fun fact, this ability can also be used to detect and reveal a cloaked unit. So if you see the shimmer of a cloaked unit that's undetected, you can use fungal growth, and if you hit that unit, it will become attackable. It will lose its cloak. Microbial Shroud is the second ability. Like fungal growth, Microbial Shroud is an AoE ability. However, Shroud, as I will call it, is used to help your Zerg instead of control the enemy. After activation of the ability, the Infestor will create an orange cloud in the area for 11 seconds. This cloud reduces the incoming damage from air units by 50%. You heard me. Any ground unit in the area is taking half damage from enemy air units. This ability is best used, as you would expect, when you have ground units up against air units and do not need to move around or spread out. Neural Parasite is the final ability. When you activate this ability, you can choose a single enemy target. Once targeted, the Infestor extends whatever that thing is and takes control of the target unit. This means that for that 11-second duration, you can control the enemy unit. This ability is primarily used against high-value, late-game units. Ideal targets include, but are not limited to, Thors, siege tanks, carriers, motherships, archons, etc. At the end of the 11 seconds, or if the infestor is killed during this time, the connection is lost, and the unit returns to its original owner. As a final note on neural parasite, the answer to your burning question is yes, absolutely. You can use neural on a probe and make a nexus. Do with that knowledge what you will. Dealing with infestors can be frustrating, since they are so control-oriented. You have a couple of choices. You can either try and kill the infestors directly, or deal with their abilities. I'll talk about trying to mitigate each ability in just a moment. If you're trying to simply get rid of the infestors, your best bet is going to be anti-spellcaster units. For Terrans, that usually means ghosts, since both steady targeting and EMP round are excellent choices. For Protoss players, you're definitely going to want to get some High Templar in the mix so that you can use feedback to get rid of all that infestor energy. For Zerg players, it's a bit different. Your anti-spellcaster units are really just whatever unit doesn't care. Having lurkers, ultralisks, or even honey badgers would probably be fine. Now to talk about mitigating each ability. First up, Fungal Grow. Up against Fungal, you have two choices. You can either try and do some sick, epic micro to dodge the fungal growth, or you can take my recommendation and just keep your forces a bit spread out. Fungal growth can't do nearly as much damage against a loose spread as it does a big group of units. If you are seeing Microbial Shroud in play, I'm going to assume that it's because you have an air army. When they cast Microbial Shroud, you can either retreat until it dissipates in 11 seconds, or you can try and fight through it. Since the Shroud only works against air attacks, I think it makes logical sense to just add in some ground units to help. Also, it should be noted that the player casting Shroud is going to want to stay within the Shroud, so any amount of AoE or splash damage that you can deal within that Shroud will be huge. In other words, your goal is to try and turn their safe place into a danger place. Terran players, siege tanks can be a great addition for dealing with Shroud because they're ground-based and deal splash damage. Protoss players, I don't think I can understate how disgustingly strong Storm is against a Shroud player. Your enemy is practically telling you exactly where to storm. Zerg players, lurkers work fabulously, since just like siege tanks, they are a ground-based splash damage unit. Neural Parasite is a tricky one. I'm going to go ahead and rule out killing your own units as a solution. That means the only real option is to kill the Infestor. Neural is ideal when it's used against low numbers of high value targets. My recommendation then is to play the opposite. Try and outnumber the Infestor with smaller units. For Terrans, this usually means a front line of Marine Marauder for Bio, or maybe Hellbats for Mech. Protoss, a couple warp-in rounds of charge zealots should give those infestors plenty to think about.
Assimilation successful.
For Zerg players, Zerglings, Banelings, or Roaches can easily overwhelm a group of infestors. The big risk with going with that plan, however, is fungal growth. Fungal growth, by design, is a counter to those smaller groups of units that die very quickly. So if you're also worried about fungal Zerg players, I'm inclined to recommend Ultralisks as the counter for both neural and fungal. Ultralisks have a passive ability that makes them immune to the effects, as seen here. The Infestor cannot even target the Ultra or neural. I think that just about covers everything. If you happen to have any questions, comments, or want to say how wrong I am, feel free to relay in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.